house looks just like the one next to it. And the one next to that. And the one next to that. A young couple live in it.
Nocturnal somnambulism. You know what? You know what? I will bet you anything it's genetic. I mean...
They're back.
All right. There we go, guys. Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday show. Bonus points if you know what movie those clips were from. That was just announcing a restock of the No Joke coming September 19th on my website. But do you know the movie, Tad?
I know I've seen the movie. That was our generation growing up.
Totally.
Yeah, I don't. I'm gonna guess wrong, and everyone's gonna make
Hey,
fun of me.
that's okay. I've been realizing more and more how obscure my references are, and I went to a music event a couple weekends ago, and I made a reference, and I'm like, it doesn't even apply anymore. It's like telling somebody about a mixtape. So,
Oh yeah, the kids now they go like this for phone calls instead of like this. And my
Totally.
daughter still she can't grasp the idea that a phone could have been stuck on a wall and you had to have a cord, and that someone else could pick it up elsewhere in the house and listen to your whole phone conversation. I know.
I had siblings, so that definitely happened. It went both ways. So, yeah, what a shout out to High Plains Bud real quick. He guessed it. Poltergeist, the original Poltergeist movie, classics. But that's where the clips came from. And Tad, where
Nice,
did
nice,
where did
nice. All
you
right,
just come from?
I got one thing to share here too. Let me see
Please.
if I can figure this out, since everyone here loves to give you a little bit of a hard time. I found your doppelganger
Uh-oh.
at our conference this weekend. Let me see if I can pull it up. If those of you missed it on social media, I posted it to my social media and tagged Chad, but let me see if I can share it here.
I gotta find that. It's
Share
Robert.
screen. Let me see if I can find it. I'll just share my whole screen and then I'll pull it up.
It's a little
All right.
sprocket. Okay. Do you want me to? Okay, I'll add it
There
to
we
the
go.
page.
Did it pull off?
Yep,
It's like young Chad.
it is. And man, he's got the nice like normal colored beard going on. Like that's where it differs. But oh my gosh, man, I've never said this about another man, but he's got lovely hair.
It's a good looking guy. Yeah,
Good
no
looking
denying
kid.
it. No denying it.
That
But
is
yeah, this was at the
awesome.
conference this last weekend in Bozeman. It was awesome. So
So, okay, how many days was the event?
3 days.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know how to stop sharing here. I'm gonna figure that out. Okay. It was 3 days. Started on Friday, 8 o'clock in the morning, super early, with workshops from the Bug Lady and Dr. Nadia Saba. So people either got like a full greenhouse HVAC airflow class that was like 3 hours long, or they were with Suzanne doing bug stuff for 3 hours, just like so much information.
In the
And
field
then
too. It's hard to beat in the field.
yeah, and then everyone showed up and we kicked it off with tours. So people got to tour the whole facility. They got to see everything. Like Collective really opened the doors. I mean, they have like three or four full length, climate controlled next gen greenhouses. And then they have hoop houses, they have outdoor, they just let everyone check it all out. It was pretty cool. Um,
Ye-
yeah, there's footage on our Instagram page, or I think I did on YouTube. I actually did a full tour of their place last year or the year before that you guys can see if anyone wants to see what it looks like on the inside.
And I saw Brandon Hudson, Tatsu Sadhu, I believe it is, on Instagram. He had some awesome pictures up from the event as well. He was one of the speakers. It looks like you
Yeah.
had a lot of speakers. Question though, you said it's next gen greenhouse. What is next gen about it? Is it like AI
Well, that's the
driven
brand.
or?
There's a
Oh,
brand called
okay.
Next Gen. They make high-end greenhouses that are very, I guess they're easier to control the climate in compared to some of the other ones. It's not like a cheap
Is
greenhouse
it
setup because
is it just like a dual layer polycarbonate or?
I could not even guess at all the specifics of it personally, but
Okay.
it's basically they have to be able to grow in, 100-degree weather Fahrenheit, and then also in -30, -40. So, there's a lot that goes into that in terms of climate control, and that's what,
Yeah.
Nadia was really diving into.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, ultimately, it's still probably better and probably cost effective, especially on scale when you're using free light. I imagine there's supplemental lighting too, but you still have the
Yes.
benefit of the sun, and that goes a long way and incentivizes people to try that. Because if I hear 100 degrees and then negative degrees, yeah, that's a lot of work and specificity to dial that in as well, because you don't want to be overpaying and playing this game with your environment.
Yeah, they get a lot of heavy winds too, so that's a whole 'nother factor. So they were actually doing some breeding, trying to get earlier finishing plants that can handle the weather out there. 'Cause, outdoor in Bozeman is no joke, pun intended. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, dude, I'm glad that event happened, and that you had a lot of people out there, a lot of people supporting. I'm sure next year you're gonna do it again. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
you'll have to come out next year. They actually so the last day we were done after the first 2 days, so, like, my responsibility is over at that point, and then the Living Soil Alliance hosted, so if you bought a ticket, you get this 3rd day included, and essentially they had someone from the Ganjier program come out who was actually I'd never seen this before, but it was very similar to, like, a sommelier experience, and they did a really good job of it, actually. I was worried so in my head, the tasting event was gonna be like, everyone show up, here, try all the weed from the Living Soul Alliance, taste it, have fun with it. Um, or it was gonna be more of like this, more structured event. And my concern with the structured event is like everyone just wants to try the weed, right? You don't wanna be sitting around getting lectured all day. But she did a really good job of explaining, the nuances and like people did blind tasting, so they were really focused on what the flavors were and what the
Okay.
experience was versus when you know what something is, you kind of already have preconceived notions of how you think it's gonna taste or how much you're gonna like it just based on the strain name. So, it actually was really well done. I know there's some, controversy around the Ganjier program. All I can say is the lady who came out, Carrie, in Montana, did a phenomenal job. Everyone had a great experience with it, and it was really, really well done. So
Good.
that's all the
Yeah.
with them.
Yeah, I mean, it's all information worth knowing, especially for people who are very into cannabis. It benefits breeders, it benefits the connoisseur because, again, you learn how to break these things down. One of my revelations was, where in your nose does the scent hit you? Is it down here? Is it up here? And that,
Mhm.
different cultivars actually have distinct signatures and you can really kind of clue in on them. It's expensive, but it's all information worth knowing. One of the things that does make me curious, though, because again, you said the bias, a lot of times when people look at it, just even the color, that's why, the term Instagram weed. And by the
Mhm.
way, guys, everybody in chat, if you guys have questions for us, if you'd like to learn more about organic growing, a question on something you're doing, even a question about some of the speakers or the event, just let us know in chat. Be happy to get those up there. But when it comes back to that bias about, trying and experiencing flower, I'm always curious about the format. Was it concealed in a joint? Were they loading
Yeah.
bongs? How did they present that?
I think, and again, I didn't participate for two reasons. One, because I was pretty busy cleaning up after the first 2 days, and two, I knew I was
Perfect.
driving people, and I have a very low tolerance, so I did not participate in the event. I was just kind of peeking in and out. Um, I did grab one of the drinks that's from the brand Sinful. They're like 30 milligram drinks, and they use Collective Elevations weed in the drinks, and their root beer was by far the best tasting edible like drink I've ever had. It was really well
Wow.
done. So yeah, it was good. But I think what they did is they had like they went over like the different aromas, whatever flavors they were getting from it. They had people do what I think you call a dry hit, where you take your
Hmm.
like a pre-roll or a joint, and you take like a puff of
Yep.
it without lighting it to try and get some of those flavors. Um, and so people, there was kind of that was kind of collaborative, and then they would smoke them and have more. Oh, Steve was there. Okay, thank you. 4 samples, a gram each. So yeah,
Perfect.
there we go.
And I
Thanks,
had
Steve.
that. Yeah, and I hope you enjoyed that blind samples. If you found out the names later and you have a favorite, let us know in chat. But that is, that is something that I went and I visited somebody and I brought them some things, and they're kind of you know an OG teaching me things. So they're like, the best way to present your stuff and to sample it for somebody is always in the joint format. It's because one, you get to control how it was prepared. You get to control the burn because you get like your own nice grind on it. Don't do it like a week before, do it maybe right before you're supposed to head to the place, but roll up some nice joints. Because again, that dry hit, super important, because
Mhm.
that the visual input is absent. So you really have to rely on your nose, your taste buds, and then ultimately the effects. So yeah, I thought that was interesting because I always, and most people too, you got really pretty flowers and they're just glistening. So you love to present them to people. It's like, hey man, take a look at this. But something like the sommelier or the ganjier experience is more about the experience overall versus the visuals.
Yeah, you can see
So,
Steve's latest comment here. He talks about it. Um, what was cool about it was they also had like a microscope, so they blew it up so people could see what the trichomes really look like, and they invited all the local bud tenders to attend. It was a free event for them,
mhm,
and so they could really get educated on the benefits of living soil, better understand how to evaluate cannabis, and it was just a really good all around educational event. So I
good.
appreciate that things like this are happening, because I don't know of anyone else really doing anything like that, where you have a 2 day pretty heavy science based conference, and then you get to do this tasting event after. So
Yeah.
it was good. All the feedback for the most part was really good on the event. So I'm really glad we had
And
the conference.
just even putting the event content aside, which was tremendous, you get to network, you get to meet people, you get to have those conversations where the synapses are firing, you're creating new wrinkles in your brain, you're learning, and that's just a
Mhm.
fun place to be around. Because sometimes we'll say sativa indica to somebody and they're just like, what's that? And you're just like, I can't have a deep conversation with you, but we'll keep talking
One
anyways.
Yeah, one interesting note that I learned, and this was not at the conference, but just before the conference, is that um, some of the latest research on trichomes is showing that. I mean, I don't know if we talked about this on the show or if I've even talked to you about it, but essentially, uh, just because a bud looks frostier or has higher trichome density doesn't necessarily reflect higher THC or better weed. There's no correlation there, where it's purely just aesthetic bag appeal, which I think is really interesting, because we've always gravitated towards like, the frostiest looking plants, but those aren't, as most consumers will know, those aren't necessarily that's not the best experience, but it's also
Right.
not necessarily the highest THC or, better cannabinoid content. It just doesn't correlate all that well.
And that it's interesting because that's something that, at least I and probably a lot of other people have taken for granted or just maybe as assumed knowledge because more trichomes the better, because that's where the cannabinoids are, that's where the terpenes are. But to visually represent the difference, we've all had some of that like older Afghani stuff or some of the older stuff that's just not as trichome laden as what we have today, but we know the effects that had on us. So hopefully that will
Yeah.
visually put it into perspective for some people. It's like density doesn't always equate to um, potency. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I thought that was interesting. So,
that is interesting. I'd love to actually look into that more because it makes me wonder if it's the formation of the trichome head, if it's, because there's more trichome heads. Is there more filler material, more lipids, fats? What about it is it? So that's, I'm sure, a rabbit hole we could go down. I do see one question in here already, and I appreciate you for typing question in front of it or just a capital Q. That kind of helps us, catches our eye as we're going by. Dark water herbs to keep tropical long flowering plants manageable in a smaller space. What are the best approaches? Dimming the light, confining the roots, cutting the plant back down when it gets too tall. You've mentioned things that will work. Giving it less light. Typically, like in the veg stage, you don't need as much. And again, we're saying smaller space. I'm assuming a tent. So I'm assuming a home grow, quality over quantity is going to be your approach to it. Ultimately, though, flipping to flower sooner. That's the ultimate answer that I can give, is just flipping to flower sooner. Yes, you'll still do your LST while you manage it out. Yes, you still may top. I've topped plants 2 or 3 times. So those are all good things. But I don't know, Tad, do you have anything to kind of add to what he's put or what I've put there? Is there anything nutritional that they would maybe want to do or could do?
yeah, that's a good question. So the first off, I would push back a little on dimming the lights. That's all relative. I mean, if we're talking about being at 300 or 400 ppfd, I'd say that's really too low. If you're talking
Mhm.
about dimming it from 1200 down to 800, then I'd say that's probably a great idea. So
It's a good
it
qualifier.
depends. You should be
Yeah.
measuring your light, and we want to make sure we have sufficient light, because at the end of the day, you don't want to grow a tropical plant and then find out that you didn't get any good buds off of it because you didn't provide enough light for adequate photosynthesis. So other than that, all those other ones are pretty good ideas. Just keep in mind, if you are organic and you can find the roots by going in a smaller pot, you'll just need to feed it more frequently. You'll have more frequent watering events. All of those things are something to be aware of. Um, on the fertility side, oh, the other thing is all of these things are to a certain extent some level of plant stress or plant
Mhm.
stimulus, depending on how you want to look at it. And that can impact its susceptibility to pathogens as well as pests. So um,
Okay.
just something to be aware of there as you are trimming it or confining the roots or doing these other things. These are stressing the plant, which can produce more secondary metabolites, but it can also open you up a little bit more to pests and pathogens. On the
Okay.
fertility side, I wouldn't do a ton differently other than really manage nitrogen well to make sure you're not overdoing it.
Okay. And that's kind of a suggestion that Kingfisher had in here. Shout out to Kingfisher. He said, I would run veg newts further into flower if you have a 12 to 14 week plant. Again, typically veg formulas are higher in nitrogen. That's something that tends to decrease in flower. Um, I'd almost think that would encourage more growth if you continued with that longer. But I'm not the one to grow 12 to 14 week flowering plants, so I'm speculating on that portion there.
You would need more nitrogen for a longer plant so it doesn't run out. But yeah, I mean, fish hydrolysate's probably the easiest way to do it.
Okay.
That'll give you pretty good available phosphorus as well as nitrogen, and then you could supplement that with something like potassium sulfate to really hit your major macronutrients, um, and kind of spoon feed the plant if it is going a lot longer and you're starting to fade too early.
Okay. Yeah, that's because that is one of the things about growing the longer flowering plants that people may sometimes underestimate. It's like, yes, it's beneficial if you have a larger pot because it's going to be in there longer. But there is a difference of meeting the nutritional needs for 8 weeks versus something that requires 14 weeks. So the timing will be different. And that may, lend right into what you and Kingfisher had kind of said there about, nitrogen, not necessarily cutting it or reducing it at the actual flower date. Because again, my suggestion is flip it into flower as soon as you can. So there's got to be some sort of
Yeah.
veg formula input there. Okay, thank you for that question. We've got a couple more here. Let's see. Dumps in this. Says question. What's the methodology behind Synganics growing? What rate should someone apply a conventional canna salt line, and how often with respects to maintaining microbe life? I'm going to turn this over to you, Tad, but I do want to add, well, I know. My personal experience is, I grew what I would call Synganics for many years, but that didn't mean it was an even balance of both inputs continuously. Typically what I did is I used an amended soil that already had nutrients in it that would get me to pretty much about the time where I wanted to flip. So maybe 30 to 45 days. Right before flip and for the first few weeks of flowering is when I would add synthetic nutrients just to kind of like immediate impact, hit that ground running, do it. But I'd also amend my soil about 2 to 3 weeks into flowering, which would hopefully let it finish through that. So that was my approach to Synganics, and I'm sure there's many different ones out there.
Mhm.
But do you have an approach or any kind of comment to the question that's being asked here?
Yeah, so I think the idea of it is you have, some people that grow using mineral salts or synthetic chemicals, and then you have other people that grow using organic inputs. And the most common combination of those is through using organic soils, like living soils, and then feeding light amounts of mineral salts over the top, like you described, as the way of getting immediately available nutrients. And there's some myths around this. This idea that all synthetic fertilizers kill microbes is simply not true. There's a lot of research that shows that mineral salts feed microbes in appropriate doses. So as long as you're not overfeeding, where your EC is too high, you're raising it too high, then you're not creating osmotic pressure in the root system, and you should be able to do it quite successfully. And if you manage that, then you can reuse the soil too.
Nice. Which is a big benefit and something everybody should really look into for the future. Not only does it save you money each run, but you don't have to get rid of it. That used to be my biggest pain in the butt. It's like, what do I do with all this stuff? So I have a ton of raised beds outside. But yeah, good
And
question.
this relates to giant pumpkin growers and some of these other giant vegetable growers. Is they originally were using all organics, or a lot of them were, sorry, a lot of them were just feeding synthetic minerals, like more conventional agriculture style, and they started incorporating organic inputs like mycorrhizal fungi and compost teas, and a lot more compost. And then they were able to, by utilizing both organics and mineral salts in conjunction with genetics improving, able to increase their yields every year. Back in the day when I first started, 800 pounds, 1,000 pounds was like a big deal. And now we're over 2,200 pounds. So just in the last decade or two, it's really, it's more than doubled. So some of that's genetics, some of that stuff we've learned, and then some of it is this combination of light mineral salts in conjunction with better organic soils.
Tazarella says, I love my living soil. And I think Chunky Nugs is about to coin a new term. I don't think I've ever heard this. His question, can you go living Synganic? So that would be Synganic approach plus microbes, which I think you just described.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different terms out there. The term living soil is
Yeah.
not even a great term, honestly. So yeah, sure.
Right.
Coin a new one.
Don't look into it too far, guys. Along the same words of semantics and terminology here, it says, would Epsom salt or cow mag use make my organics synganic? It depends, probably on the source that they're derived from, I would assume, as far as the cow mag goes.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Some of this is just semantics too, like,
Yeah.
and it depends on what definition you're following for these. I mean, that's technically Epsom salt is a mineral salt. Technically, it's magnesium sulfate, but so is gypsum. It's calcium sulfate, and so I think it's okay to use those things in appropriate doses. But there is some processing that goes into them that would make them technically probably fall into synthetic category.
Okay. Yeah, I'd probably lean there too. But again, I think that's, ask 10 experts that question and you'll receive a variety of answers. So it's slicing the onion thin with that one. So whatever makes you feel good. And shout out to the chat too, not only for the question, but I did see Hell's Keeper 420 had a good question in here about popping seeds and the helmets getting stuck on. You guys popped in plenty of great answers to the chat, and Hell's Keeper, yeah, listen to them. They've got you covered. So that's a good one. And again, thank you for being here again, asking some more questions. We've got another question, repeat question here. Oh, I'll skip up. Well, no, we'll go here. I got another one. He says, does Chitosan work to increase terp or trike development? Now, let's go back for some people who, a lot of people watching this on the KIS Organics YouTube channel, familiar with your other podcasts, maybe people that have attended the workshop this weekend, they may already be familiar with that. But I've got a lot of new people coming to organics, which again, Tad, I appreciate you showing up every second Tuesday over here because we're doing a lot of good work getting people on this. But Chitosan, can you define that? What is that for people?
Well, I believe Chitosan's a brand that makes, isn't
Chitinase?
it?
Because
No,
that's the
chitinase is an enzyme, I
from
believe, that is created
insect
from
shells, right?
chitin. I thought yes, it can be derived from insect shells, and a few other sources, but I thought Chitosan was a particular brand of
Is
this. Am I
naturally,
wrong?
according to AI Google,
I could
chitosan
be
is a
wrong.
naturally derived semi-synthetic polymer made from chitin, the primary component of crustacean shells, insects, and fungi. Okay, so chitin is what I was thinking. Chitosan probably is the
It's derived from chitin. So,
refined, yeah, derived. The refined version. Okay. See, I was half
and
right. That's why Tad's here, man.
well, and I don't have a lot of experience with chitosan specifically. Typically, we use something like crustacean meal or crab meal or insect frass, as all of those contain chitin, with the idea being that they break down to chitinase, which stimulates systemic acquired resistance in the plant. So basically, this uh, chitinase follows a pathway into the plant that stimulates pest resistance. And so that's which, if it's stimulating a pest resistance, that may be also stimulating secondary metabolite production because those are also immune responses by the plant. So it is possible. I haven't seen any real research that shows that this is happening in cannabis, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't come across it yet. But I do love insect frass more than crustacean meal because it tends to come in with lower levels of sodium and chlorides, which I do see building up in a lot of folks' soils.
Hmm.
And they're not good for soil health. So yeah, I think for me, I would look into you could buy a product that has chitosan in it, or you could also just use something like insect frass, which also is going
Okay.
to give you NPK and beneficial microorganisms and a lot of other great stuff in there.
And that's what I have in a bag here is I have insect frass. So yeah, and as you described it is how I was familiar with it too. It's just again kind of priming a plant response that can lead to benefits. Um, okay, so thank you for that question, Travis. Let's see here. I just got a couple new ones. Rodlepin, or we're going to go with my bad pronunciation. I apologize. He says, I'm ignorant. I'm ignorant about the language. I'm ignorant about organics. Do you use the same soil over and over and keep amending it? Now, organics, there's a multitude of ways to approach that. It doesn't, I don't think necessarily mean you have to reuse your soil, but a lot of organic people, again, we're getting into words and semantics here, but a lot of people try to be regenerative or
Mhm.
yeah, and that's regenerative. That's typically when you're using it. But Tad, you've got me reusing soil. So the Westport Blend, I've amended it. I amended
Great.
it using the KIS Nutrients Pack. I actually have a video coming out Thursday showing the process. But what do you think about that? Because you've got me doing it. But does that define
Yeah,
organic?
no, so organics just means you're not using any synthetic or man-made inputs, but realistically, if we want to take that to the next level, like you said, regenerative or I even I'd look at it as being just being more sustainable, not having to rebuy our media or our soil every cycle. We can reuse it, and so by reusing it, we can improve the microbiology in it over time as the microbes co-evolve to the roots of the cannabis plant that we keep growing in it. But also, we can manage the fertility in it really well too, so that we can create a mix that is just as good, or if not better, the second cycle or the third cycle as the first cycle. So that's that's the big thing, and then if you're in a commercial facility or even in a market where you don't wanna move soil in and out of, like, your even your basement or your as a grower or your garage, that's a great way to not have to move bulky stuff around. It saves a lot of labor, so it's more sustainable, you're saving the environment, you're saving money on media, and you're saving your back trying to move it around, so there's a lot of reasons it makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Good question there. And thank you for framing it that way because yeah, it's a pain in the butt to get rid of soil sometimes. So I'm happy to be
Yeah.
amending it now. I've got 3 trash bins in the shed. I'm just kind of filling them as I finish, building a large enough mass to do it, and then I'm amending it. And you guys will see that process that I did on Thursday. And don't worry, Tad, I ran it by Brandon. I was like, hey, dude, just please, could you once over this for me? Make sure I didn't miss anything. And he's like, we're good to go.
Great.
So it's
Awesome.
it's been
Yeah, yeah.
proofread.
Good.
Yeah, here's a question from Duke Piles. That's a great name. Any chemical-free solutions or best practices for gnat control? Sticky traps only do so well, and sticky traps are only working because it's getting things that are above the soil, and their larvae, or yeah, above the soil, but their larvae are in the soil, Tad.
Mhm.
So I've got a couple things. I know you've got a few things too.
Yeah, go for it. I'll fill in any kind of
Okay,
anything else to
I'll
add.
leave I'll leave the little friends to you. So oh god, mosquito dunks is something that I have used in the past. Again, this is small scale home grow. This isn't something that isn't going to be beneficial commercially. The main thing inside of it is BTI, Bacillus thuringiensis israelis, I believe. I mispronounce everything, but it'll
That was
get you close
close.
enough. It'll get you close enough.
Yeah.
Um, and for me, that has definitely knocked them down. I don't know if I would necessarily say eliminated, but it's not something where I see them flying around frequently. Typically, it takes 3 applications, do the applications about 5 days apart, maybe. Um, and then, problem resolved until who knows, 6 months later, some more pop up. But I know you have something actually on the KISS website that you could get in, you could put in, and it's more of a permanent, better solution. The SFs,
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Well,
that's
first
where
off,
I
I
was
want to
going.
say start off with a positive ID to make sure you're actually dealing with fungus gnats. They're not root aphids. They're not
Ooh.
some random gnat that just came into the room. Um, really make sure you get a good idea. And Catchmaster makes these awesome posters. In fact, I have a bunch of 8x11 sizes right now that I brought back from the conference. But if you can get your hands on one of those, they have photos of an actual mosquito. Sorry, I was thinking mosquito bits. Actual fungus gnat on a sticky trap as you would see it as a grower. So start with having a good ID, and then also make sure you have a jeweler's loop or some dino light, some kind of tool to really allow you to see what the actual insect is. So don't just start treating just because you see a bug in your room. Um, and then, like you mentioned, mosquito bits, mosquito dunks, you can get those at Home Depot or on Amazon. It's Bacillus thuringiensis israeliensis. They work really well, like you said. But you can also get commercially viable BTI too. I would buy them from a company that is reputable. There's a lot of places out there that offer them. Yeah. So anyway, you can find it. That being said, so that's one approach. That's probably my first approach in conjunction with sticky traps, just because it's the cheapest. But that bacteria has to come in contact with the larva, and something that's a little bit better, like you mentioned, is the SF nematodes, Steinername feltiae. I'm butchering it a little bit myself here.
Hey, I'll
Um,
take your word for it.
and those are very effective against fungus gnats, as well as other certain other things. They actually even work for fleas out in your yard. They're really amazing nematodes. And you obviously have to apply them correctly, but it's pretty easy to do on a small scale at the least, and it works phenomenally well. And yeah, we carry a lot of these things through the KIS Organics website. But um, yeah, for fungus gnats specifically, those are good options. You never want to spray an oil on your soil. You can spray the foliage of your plants, but really, I think just trapping the adults as well as with sticky traps and then applying something to catch the larval stages is a great approach.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. Again, a couple different options for you there. I just wrote down a note because you said oil on the soil. I want to get back to that one because I've been
Okay.
spraying some stuff lately, and I actually just ordered. It should be here today or tomorrow, but some EpiShield from you. So, going to be
Oh,
putting that to use.
yeah, great
Um,
product.
you're on the
That's another
grower
good
though.
point.
Yeah, and this one kind of ties into what we're talking about though, because fungus gnats, a lot of times living soil, it's almost synonymous. It will be a thing, so you need to know how to treat them. But one of the things I always hear responsible for it, and maybe you can speak to this, is just kind of soil moisture content. It tends to be, oh well, it's a sign that your soil is just too moist, and there's too much organic stuff in there, so it's there. And then people were like, well, bottom water for a week and don't top water, let it dry out. What do you think about that approach?
I think it depends because a targeted dryback can't, like we've been talking about this idea of plant stress and plant stimulus even, and I did a whole podcast on it. I've done a few recently. And so when you do a dryback in organic soil, you are essentially slowing down to a certain extent some of the nutrient cycling that's happening because you're getting some root hair death, as well as the microbes are not going to be as active in a soil that's very low moisture levels. So we typically want to keep the soil within a fairly reasonable range of moisture without getting the big drybacks that we get, as a rock wool grower or cocoa and salts grower. But you could put something over the top of the soil. People do that with like sand or diatomaceous earth or things, as a way of trying to reduce that, create a barrier for the larva. The adults trying to come back in and lay, as well as helping to dry that out a little bit. You may be overwatering slightly if you are seeing a lot of fungal gnat growth, but they do just like moist soils that have high organic matter, which is essentially what we're doing and with living soil already. So yeah, it is a strategy. I I don't tend to rely on it, but you might want to back off a little bit on your watering and see if that also helps because you may be just overwatering too.
I love J5's comment here. He said, "What? No fungus gnats? Are you even organic, bro?"
Yeah, everyone's dealt with them. They're like the easiest of all cannabis pests. You just
Yeah,
want to make sure
don't
you
worry.
keep them under control because if they do get out of control, if you ignore them, they can eventually, eat the plant roots a little bit. They can get stuck inside your buds. They're annoying. So you do want to take care of it.
Yeah. And so that looping back to, we said oil on the soil a second ago, and I have been using um Lost Coast therapy on the plants, which is again, it's a suffocant. It's going to
Mhm.
suffocate the insect that's on there. But I'm spraying my plants. I've got a new freaking AC Infinity like electrolyze like sprayer, so I'm no longer doing this. So I'm just in there, just woo woo woo. What about when you're spraying oil and EpiShield? EpiShield is going to be my next thing. Again, I want
Mhm.
multiple kind of modes of action. And just talking to Brandon, I think this one's really going to take care of the thing. As I'm spraying, though, you always want to spray the underside of the leaves. And again, I'm getting happy. There's a lot of that dripping onto my soil. Am
Mhm.
I damaging the soil life? Am I suffocating things by allowing that? Should I put like a paper plate around my stem so nothing hits the soil when I'm spraying oils?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry so much about that necessarily, but some good advice that I got from Dram this weekend in their talk.
Okay.
I mean, so droplet size makes a huge difference with surface area coverage. And they actually sell cards you can buy, spray coverage cards, so you can see how well you're spraying a plant. You can put it in the canopy and
Okay.
see what kind of coverage you actually get on it. But it's much better to spray a plant with a mist, a fine mist, than it is to like douse it to where it's dripping with runoff. You actually get better coverage and better results, um, which is a little counterintuitive for folks. And so that was a
Right.
good
More is
reminder.
better.
Yeah, I've done it where I've just soaked the crap out of a plant, but actually you get better coverage by putting a finer mist out. That's why one of the reasons foggers are so popular commercially,
Yeah.
um, is because they give you a much smaller droplet size. But yeah, you do want to make sure you spray. Again, we're talking about not in flower, so before trichome formation. After the first week or so of flower, you're probably not spraying anymore. If some oil drips down onto your soil, it's going to be just fine. But we don't want to do like oil-based products as soil drenches. And
Okay.
we don't want
Yeah.
to be spraying the soil with oil. But if a little contact comes and falls down there, it's going to be just fine.
All right.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, thanks for clearing that one up because that is the cool thing. That is the difference about this new sprayer that I have is it really does micronize or get the very, very, very small droplets, but I'm only spraying 4 like 16-inch plants and you have to mix up so much and I'm like cutting the recipe down to a quarter of what it's actually doing and I still have a whole bunch. So I spray enough small droplets that it just becomes a drippy mess, but that's
Yeah,
fine.
the other thing too is people in our industry have, been using paint sprayers for years,
Hmm.
and they're just not ideal. There's a reason why we have horticultural sprayers. Like Dram makes it's a backpack sprayer, BP4, I think is the number on it. There's a phenomenal difference in the spray coverage and the droplet size and all the different things using the right sprayer. So one of the reasons some people don't get the results they want is simply because they have the wrong equipment. And
Hmm.
I'll admit I'm guilty of it myself too, in the past of using those sorts of things. But if we want to do things optimally, then it's really important to invest in a good sprayer. I think Birchmeyer is another company that makes a pretty good one, but Dram really is my go-to when it comes to anything related to water or spray equipment.
And this, I think would relate not only to pest prevention or reduction, like we're talking about spraying with the oils, this would probably also apply to, or as far as droplet size, that would probably equally apply to like foliar applications. If somebody was spraying Epsom salt or magnesium, smaller the droplet, the easier it is for the plant to absorb? Or does that really matter as
Yeah, I mean,
much?
the greater the surface area. One other thing, since we're talking about oils, made me think of soaps, and just a friendly reminder for folks that insecticidal soaps are actually a different carbon chain than Dawn or Dr.
Mm,
Bronner's Castile soap. And so they've actually done research that shows that this particular length of carbon chain in these insecticidal soaps leads to a higher kill rate and a more effective spray. So it's not necessarily that those other things, and I see other people trying different IPM things in the chat. If it's working for you, that's great. But if we want to just talk about, what's optimal or industry standard and those sorts of things, then that's where these little differences come into play. And I just want to mention them.
again, it's those little nuances that experience can teach you. So I appreciate you injecting those into the conversation,
Yeah.
because we hear these things often. And again, surface level, yeah, makes sense. So nuances, I appreciate that. Good question here. It says, I'm running a 3x3 bed with living soil going into its third year now. How long can I go? Only amending with compost and amendments. And when will I have to replace the peat? First part of the question is related to nutrients. Nutrient soil testing, I think, is going to be the answer. I know, Tad, you've covered that quite a bit. You probably have a show on that. The second part of the, and again, Logan Labs, I think, is who you use. KIS Organics can interpret the soil test for you when you do them. So pretty easy, even for a 3x3 grower. And you can add to that if you want. But the second part, I want to address to you, because I think that deals more with soil structure and maybe compaction. And one thing
Mhm.
about like the Westport Blend or the KIS Biochar is you use big pieces of pumice. I've not seen perlite in any of your stuff. So that I know directly relates to soil structure amongst other things. But he says, when will I have to replace the peat? And what do you think about that? Is that soil structure related, or is that just nutrient too?
Yeah, so first off, not everyone's going to soil test. I realize that. If you want to be as dialed or accurate as possible, then the soil test is the only way of getting like a quantifiable number to hit a target, which is something we like to do. But I'm not here to say you have to soil test. So a lot of people will just use a complete organic fertilizer, like our nutrient pack. Like that's what you did this last reamendment.
Yep.
You didn't do any testing. You just said, okay, well, here's what we're gonna add. We're guessing a little bit because everyone's genetics, pot size, container size, pot size is going to be different. So this is our best guess, sort of a shotgun approach to try and get your fertility back to where it was at the beginning of your first cycle. Um, and yes, you're right. So when we talk about peat moss, we're talking about a little bit more about soil structure, maybe a little bit about pH. But yeah, so over time, your soil levels are going down in your pot. That's due to the bulk density increasing, sort of that compaction. And over time, that can be an issue. And that's one of the reasons we like to get in there and sort of fluff up the soil over time. And people are worried that's going to, hurt their microbes, and it's, against the no-till. But us reaching in with our hands or a shovel is very different than what's happening agriculturally when you go through with a mechanical tiller and just chew up the soil. So
Mhm.
us going in with our hands, yes, it's probably destroying some fungal strands and messing up the community slightly. But the benefits of that, to avoid these issues with compaction, as well as sparking some more reproduction by the bacteria and archaea and some of those other microorganisms, I think is a really good thing.
Okay. All right. Because yeah, there is a big difference between just tilling it and then mixing it up. Usually it's the gosh, not the hyphae, the mycorrhizal chains that they're worried about breaking it up. Um,
Well,
so
the mycorrhizal fungus is a root symbiont, so if it's not, it only grows when it comes into contact with the roots. So if you're seeing a bunch of white hairs in your soil, you see them like wood chips being held together. That's
yep.
mycelium. but that's probably like a saprophytic fungi. It's not the break down organic matter. It's not mycorrhizal fungi. So
Ah,
mycorrhizal fungi only grows in direct contact with roots, and I think that's a really important distinction that people should be aware of, and that there's all these different species of them, and even within species, there's subspecies and differences. So I think that's an important thing to know. I'm trying to think of a good analogy around that. So like you might be no, that's a terrible analogy. I was trying to equate it to
hey, at least you stopped it before it came out.
yeah. So I guess what I would say is so be aware there's ectomycorrhizal fungi and endomycorrhizal fungi. Cannabis is endomycorrhizal, and the species we're looking for primarily are going to be listed as Rhizophagus irregularis. Anything in the with a starting with the word glomus. So you might see Glomus mossiae, Glomus irregularis, Glomus intraradices. Any of those will form a relationship with cannabis. But if you have anything that is ectomycorrhizal, it does not. That's primarily for conifers. So it's important when looking on a package that you look at that, because you may be buying millions of spores of
Yeah.
a type of mycorrhizal fungus that has no relationship with the plants you're growing.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
That boils it down back to nuances. But it's mycorrhizal fungi, man. Okay. Stay away from the ecto. And I'm going to remember that because the ecto slime from
I
Ghostbusters
knew you were going to go to
was bad.
Ghostbusters.
I'm that predictable, guys. I'm that predictable. All right, I'm going to
Uh,
take a question here, and then Steve's got a question for you about EpiShield, and then we'll get
yeah.
close to wrapping it up here. But Organic Tendency says, question for Chad. Says, your no joke has a lot of shout outs. I had a lot of really awesome people grow them. A lot of people document the grows. So that is always helpful. I appreciate that. It says, what kind of experience should we expect? Either from your genetics, the terps, the potency, the vigor, etc. I have, so no joke, I have a really great seed to harvest that is up on the channel in the Westport Blend soil. And you can watch it again from seed to harvest. You'll be able to follow the timeline. In a nutshell, typically 60 to 70 days is the flowering time. It creates a great size plant because proper nutrition in the soil. I gave it adequate light, controlled the environment. They turned out beautifully. And again, you can just see that. But the terpene profile, there's really two profiles. They're opposite. One is a tropical, fruity, red Gatorade sort of profile. That is my personal favorite. The other is like a chicken noodle soup or like a chicken bouillon. And it's great in itself. Kingfisher, actually, who was watching the show, won a Growers Cup with that pheno, and he continues to grow that pheno of the no joke. Me personally, that is the profile of my Kool-Aid man, which is part of the no joke. So I already have that profile. I didn't keep that one. I prefer the other. But those are the two profiles. And if you do go to chadwestport.com, on the main page, click the Twin Peaks Cannabis icon logo. You'll see the no joke graphic. Click on that, and boom, you're going to get a heck of a lot more than I just gave you. But that's where you can find the best information. And again, you can watch the grow out on the YouTube channel, just the no joke seed to harvest, water only in the Westport Blend soil. So that was a fun one. That was a good one. Still smoking on it.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. That
Yeah,
one
there was a
turned
lot
out.
of great weed in Montana, but I had to drive back through Idaho, so I just didn't even want to mess
Ooh.
with it. Like, I'm not carrying
No.
anything through there. So
No. Yeah, there's still
anyway,
states where, I mean, I was packing seeds earlier and I have like two just miscellaneous seeds sitting here on my table. Yeah, you go to jail for that in some states still. So yeah, don't mess around, guys. But here's your question, Tad, and this one is from Steve. So, and I'm interested because again, I've
real
got your
quick, Chad,
EpiShield. Yeah.
can you answer Jesse Brown 420? He says it says
Oh,
sold out on the website. He must have missed the
oh,
very beginning intro. I want to make sure you answer that
yeah.
for him.
Thank you for seeing that. I was on the other page. Yes, it says sold out on the website now. I am re-releasing fully on September 19th, which is Friday coming up here. I've kind of been sneaking one, maybe 2 packs up there every day or two because I'm testing a new label printing. I want to make sure that, the confirmation email is getting sent. I'm just trying to prepare myself for the 19th. So you may be able to get an early surprise. But everybody, September 19th, chadwestport.com, they will be there for you. Thanks for asking, Jesse. And Tad, thank you for seeing that one.
Can you also really quickly just highlight the comment right below it from Fourth House Genetics? Because I think that's a good point, and I wanted to clarify. When I said earlier that spraying oils or tilling soil kills microbes, um,
Mhm.
yes, both of or even drybacks, those things will kill off some microbes, but you have to remember these microbes are just like root hairs are constantly reproducing. They're in flux all the time. So, yeah, even if you kill a few microbes with some chlorinated water or by a little bit of soil disturbance or a dryback, they are resilient. They're going to come back. It's not really a huge concern. So, I just wanted to highlight that because I didn't know if I clarified that, and they brought up a good point.
Yep, this is a good point. And he's been a guest on the show as well. So shout out to Fourth House Genetics. Hope you're doing well
Awesome.
today, man. All right. Your question,
Yes,
Tad. I know.
EpiShield.
All right. Yes, EpiShield. All right. Question for Tad. It says EpiShield. And I thought this was really interesting because, again, sometimes we think of weird use cases. I don't know if this is weird. Question: EpiShield being made from essential oils. Can we put it in an oil diffuser to create a fog? Can we go full hippie inside the tent? I think is what Steve is saying. Can we go full hippie, Tad?
Great question. I don't know the answer to this. So basically, what you have in there is a couple essential oils and a carrier, which is sodium lauryl sulfate. Um, I don't know how that would act in fog in a oil diffuser. I assume it would still end up in the air, but then I just worry, how are you getting good coverage? Are you like carrying this thing around like you're
True,
saging the
true.
room? Um, I don't know. I could
Like
I
you're
could find out,
saging the room.
Steve. If you want to send us an email, we can reach out to Bioworks and get you an answer to that question. I haven't heard before, so
Yeah, my wife would kill me if I used her oil diffuser to experiment. So I'm like, oh, I can't. No, I can't. So
yeah. I mean, I would be even inclined just I know I talked about the importance of good spray equipment. Even just throwing it into a cheap bottle sprayer, though, if you need something, I think would be a potentially a better option than trying to use an oil diffuser. But you're committed to it. We'll find you a technical answer from an expert on the subject.
next year's fad, we'll move from underlighting. Once underlighting just like completely goes bust, they're gonna repurpose all that stuff to be under canopy sprays. So you'll get your under diffusers, your oil
I mean,
diffusers. That'll be the next fad. Just
I'm kind of coming around on the under canopy lighting thing. If I'm going to be honest, I would do it in
for a commercial
retro.
grow. For a commercial grow.
Well, here's the thing: you don't
No.
have, so okay. Well, here's the argument for it, and you can push back. Like this, maybe this is a worthwhile discussion. So it's a minimal amount of wattage essentially that we're
Mhm.
adding. And I don't think you're not gonna get like A plus B is not like the sum of the parts is not gonna be greater than the total amount of wattage that you're using. But it allows you to get a little bit more wattage and it allows you to get that wattage targeted closer to
Yeah.
your mids or your B quality buds. So I think the argument to use it is you get higher quality, lower buds because
Yep.
they're getting more light. They can photosynthesize better.
Yep.
Whether or not it's worth it in terms of the cost of buying the equipment to pull it off, that's a very valid question, and we could argue about it. But there's no denying that if you add under canopy lighting, you will get,
Yeah.
slightly higher yields or higher quality buds because you're giving the plant more light, but you're not just blasting it from above because there's a limit to the amount of light that the plant can take with before you start dealing with, you know, light bleaching and other issues. So I don't know. It's interesting at the
Yeah.
very least.
Yeah, because and then there's the inverse square law, and I mean the stuff is pretty
Mhm.
shaded. So stuff that is further away from the light, it's just not receiving it. The studies that I'm reading right now, So the anecdotal stuff, the experience stuff from people out in the field, that is exactly what I'm hearing. It's like, dude is turning our B buds into A buds. We're not
Yeah.
necessarily gaining like a whole bunch of biomass or a whole bunch of weight,
Yeah.
but we could sell the A buds for way more than the B buds. So absolutely, we're going to do it. So commercially, I see that. The studies I've been reading and I'm finding is exactly that. It's, I mean, to paraphrase, you add more wattage, you get more yield. So
Yep.
yeah, my where I'll probably push back, and we'll go 2 more minutes. But my
No problem.
pushback and what I wait to see is the microclimates it creates. And I base this off of when I was going to school for the sustainable ag. That's right when the vertical farming industry was taking off. People were raising millions and millions of dollars because, you know, you could grow all of this produce in this amount of space because you're stacking. And then what broke a lot of those businesses is the treatment for the microclimates you're creating, because you got lights, plants, lights, plants, lights. You have to be able to manage the environment, and it creates its own unique set of challenges. So we'll see if that turns out to be the case in cannabis, but who knows?
Well, here's the thing. When you double the amount of canopy and the amount of media in a room, you're absolutely creating a lot higher loads. When we add, 30 watts of light under a plant, I think that's a much more minimal impact in your overall environment. But I could be wrong too. I'm out of electricity in my grow, so I don't know that I can even trial it. But um, and to be fair, like I've had companies that would give me lights to under canopy lights if I wanted to experiment, so I don't have the cost because I think the cost is a
Right.
valid argument. But I think it's interesting. So if someone has the budget and wants to experiment with it and the electrical wattage, um, what I would be inclined to do is dial back my top lights,
Yeah.
again LEDs, and then add some under canopy lights to hit it from both sides and see if I could get a more uniform bud structure and yield overall. And you're probably pruning a little different, and there's probably a learning curve, but I think it's interesting. I love that we're still seeing innovation.
Yeah, I mean, it helps to have a hot take every now and then. So I'm sticking with it. I'll put my
All
foot
right.
down, and I'll,
All
I'll
right.
say, whatever happened to side lighting, guys? That was so 2 years ago.
That
Nobody's
was a whole
talking
thing.
about
That's
side
right.
lighting. So we'll end the show. Guys, come back next Tuesday on the KIS Organics YouTube channel. Every Tuesday over there, same time, 2 p.m. And Chad Westport YouTube channel, second Tuesday every month. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Any closing words, Tad?
No, I'm excited for your upcoming drop, and thanks for doing this. Talk soon.
Yeah. Yep. Talk to you soon, Tad. My pleasure. Everybody in chat, party on. You guys have a great day. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.